this. For those who play fantasy, you listened to the last episode. That one's for you. This one also will be for you. We're going to talk some QBs. We're going to talk the sleepers, breakouts, a deep sleeper, and busts. Now, this is just our opinion. This isn't, anything. This might be just who we like, who we don't like. And, I'll preference some of my information too. But I'll kick us off unless you have anything to say.
No, I prefer you to kick this one off because I know you've got your ideas on some of these guys. So,
Yep. So I'm going to start us off with our sleeper. This is going to be a guy who drafted number one. His team traded for like a lot of picks for him. One of them ended up being Caleb Williams. So I'm talking about Bryce Young from Carolina. I think what Carolina did with this new regime at the front office, they made sure that they brought in people for or target or passing targets, running targets, everywhere across the board. They brought in players to help them. Deontay Johnson being one of them. They revamped the line. They added Robert Hunt, who was in Buffalo. Dame Lewis. They brought in another tackle, and then they drafted Xavier Legette in the late rounds of the first. Another big target. He played at South Carolina. I'm not calling him USC. I don't know why people do that. Just because they have the same initials, apparently.
he's got the greatest voice in the league.
He does. If you haven't heard it, please go look him up on YouTube and just listen to any interviews. They actually had him mic'd up on the football field. And you can tell that guy just loves football too. So
I don't know anything he's saying either, which is the best part.
Yeah. But yeah, Bryce Young, I think, after the flop of a rookie year he had, I think we're going to see something new. I actually didn't mention it on my list, though, but they brought in Jonathan Brooks, too, out of Texas. They drafted him pretty high. He's going to be another option. He's coming off his ACL injury, but when he's getting going, that's the guy. And I really think it's going to be a difference maker. So I expect Bryce Young to kind of fall into the 15 to 18 quarterback range this year, and has a floor maybe of or a ceiling maybe of a top 12 this year. And that's like if everything goes right.
Okay. So for me, as far as sleepers go, I went with I got two main names on here. I don't know how much you want to consider them sleepers, but I've got Drake May and Jaden Daniels on here, and mainly because you say sleeper. I don't think either team is set up that well for these guys to succeed in year one. I think Daniels might have more weapons on offense than May does, but I think either of them could surprise people and have a halfway decent year. I don't think either of them is going to be, a top 10 this year, but I think, either of them, more Daniels than May, could end up surprising some people and having a better year than you'd think. I don't think New England. I mean, I'd have to look at their record last year. I know they weren't great, but they're a team that could surprise people. I mean, I know they don't have Belichick anymore, so that's going to be a little different how this organization goes on without him. But May was highly touted. So he's going to a solid organization. We'll see how they do. And then Daniels in Washington seems to mess up a lot of things. So we'll see how this kid does. He's coming off of, obviously, I think he won the Heisman this last year. So
Yeah. 1,000 rushing yards.
he looks like a great dual threat, and he looks like, he's got some people to throw to over there. I'm trying to think. I know they still have
Scary Terry.
Scary
Terry's
Terry.
still there. You want
Dotson.
Dotson's still there.
Dotson's solid. Did they
He
get
should
rid
be
of Logan
decent.
Thomas?
They got rid of Logan Thomas. They brought in Zach Ertz, and they drafted Ben Sinnott or Sanu, whatever you want to call him, out of Kansas State. So they have a rookie tight end. And then obviously they brought in Austin Eckler, which is never a bad thing either.
That's right. They've got Eckler too. Yeah, so Daniels I think is definitely probably more set up to succeed, maybe a little more than May. But I know May's got that Stevenson, I think, right? Ramondre Stevenson or whatever.
Yeah, and I also do think Daniels is obviously going to be set up for success year one. I think he'll start right away. Drake May would be a sleeper, just because I wouldn't expect anyone to really expect him to start because they brought in Jacoby Brissett for a reason. I could see Drake May, unless he lights preseason on fire, that he sits maybe at least half the year until he's ready. Um, but yeah, I mean, both are good sleepers there. And then moving into our breakouts, this one was tough because there's so many guys you could pick from that really take that next step forward. But I'm picking Will Levis. That's another player that I think that they brought in a whole new head coach. We have no more defensive minded coach. So you add in that factor with an offensive scheme. You bring in Calvin Ridley and Tyler Boyd, Tony Pollard, and then they added to the line and they also drafted J.C. Latham with a seventh overall pick. So they're going to protect him. And they just gave him a bunch of targets outside of DeAndre Hopkins. So when you're putting two and two together, I expect him to also take that leap this year. You know, he's a rookie last year, kind of got thrown into the mix. Tannehill was terrible. The team was kind of just running with Derrick Henry. This team is also going to be a little bit different. I don't think they're just going to be the run type of team that they were.
Okay, so as far as breakout, I have Will Levis, but I have him on one of my other tiers. But I like the Levis pick a lot because I thought the same thing with him. They brought in a lot of people, and last year he had some games that I think surprised some people. So I like the Levis pick. As far as breakout goes, I've got two people on here, and you can maybe think of breakout as maybe I don't know. I have
Go
Caleb
ahead.
and Trevor Lawrence on my breakout. The reason is obviously Caleb's got a lot of hype around him. He's got some of the best offensive weapons around him, and I think that people are expecting him to be pretty good. So I've got him on two lists. I'll reveal the other list that I've got him on later when we get there. But I've got him as the breakout, and I've got Trevor Lawrence on there because I think as of now he's definitely not exceeded expectations. I think he's definitely been below it. We mentioned it a couple podcasts ago that he had like almost the same stats up until this point. I think it's like Daniel Jones. So you don't
Yeah.
really want to be, no offense to Daniel Jones, he just got the bag, but you don't really want to be compared to him as far as what you've done in the NFL performance
Yeah.
wise. So, he's still got people around him. They don't have Ridley anymore, but they don't have Zay Jones anymore either, but they still have ETN, who's a top five running back, who's going to catch you some passes. You still have Christian Kirk. I think they still have Evan Ingram. Um, and I know they drafted, what's his name? Brian
Brian Thomas
Thomas.
Jr. Yep.
So they've got some people over there, depending on how good Thomas is this year. But to me, I mean, he's been in the league a few years. This is a big year for him. He needs to show people. He just got paid too. I
Yeah.
think this is going to be the year for him to say, okay, I am the guy. I'm not just a guy who's good enough to win you games and maybe get you to the playoffs. He needs to show, okay, I'm worth the 60 million or whatever you're paying him a year now.
Yeah.
I think this is a big year for him. And like I said, with Caleb, he's set up to succeed more than most quarterbacks are their first year. So I think you could see potentially, I don't know how many games the Bears are going to win, but I think you could see him have a really solid year.
Absolutely, with the surrounding cast, like you said, Keenan Allen brought in. They basically revamped that whole offense. Brought in Keenan Allen, Roma Dunze. They brought in DeAndre Swift. I think they added in a center too. So, the sky's the limit for Caleb Williams to skyrocket and be that top 12 quarterback. I would love to see it be higher, just because he came from USC. Um, Trevor Lawrence, he's also on one of my lists. At least it was in my head. It was one of my lists. But I actually think he could bust out this year, and not in a bust out in a good way. I think he could be like one of those players that just he's good enough to be decent for fantasy, but he's not that guy that could be the top five that everybody expected him to be. But I do think that he does take that step forward. I think Calvin Ridley is a good wide receiver, but Brian Thomas kind of fits that mold a little bit better in that offense. I think he'll actually help him succeed. One guy I did add to my list too, just recently was Anthony Richardson. I
Mm,
think
okay,
like he's getting a ton of hype
it's a good
just
pick.
across dynasty, platform, just because of what he was doing when he was the 3 games that he played before he hurt his shoulder.
Yeah,
He he tore it up, and they were talking about like per snaps. It was very comparable to Josh Allen, which is great company to be in. And
right.
if he has that type of season year long, we're talking about the QB1 of the year, which
I'm
would be
talking about
crazy.
MVP.
Yeah, he could be the MVP. That means the Colts are making the playoffs at that point if he does that.
And the bigger thing for me was, he was doing this last year, and who were his offensive weapons? He's got Michael Pittman, but he
Pittman at
didn't
that time,
have,
that was it. Yeah,
and he didn't have my guy Jonathan Taylor. I think didn't he start the year
he
on
was.
IR
He was.
or the
Yeah,
contract or whatever?
yeah, he was out for the like first 4 games, I believe.
So you didn't
Um,
have one of the top running
Josh
backs in the
Downs,
league, and yeah, Josh Downs. I mean, he hasn't really cemented himself yet. So
not yet. No,
you've got he had Pittman pretty much, and he was like you said, that was a good team before he got hurt. So that's actually a great pick. I think if he can stay healthy, that's going to be his thing. He showed that last year in only a couple games. Like if you can just not take some of those hits when you're going to scramble and stay healthy, you could easily be one of the top quarterbacks in the league.
absolutely, and that's and like I said, that's top five. Like we're talking about, like he could make that jump forward and win a lot of people fantasy championships this year because he got hurt last year, and
Yeah.
it was the trajectory of those teams that I looked at were all on the upward swing. So Anthony Richardson's one of them that I also think that will break out. My deep sleeper. So we can laugh about this one because I did change it, but as of right now, it's not going to be JJ McCarthy. It's going to be the guy
Mm.
who's got the QB1 snaps as of training camp right now. We're going with the one, the only Broadway Sam Darnold. And this is strictly on the fact that he has never had a coach and he's never had a supporting cast like he has now. His coach, Adam Gase. Bears fans remember him. Miami fans remember him. He was never a good coach. Why the Jets thought that was their guy was beyond me. Now, when you go to Sam Darnold, he got drafted with all these high expectations. I think he was a top 5 pick, I want to say. I don't remember the exact. I know it was top 10. He landed in a shitty situation. I want to say he had like Chris Ivory as his running back, and Jericho Cotchery maybe was like his wide receiver. So he didn't have a whole lot of options to throw to. I think it was Jamison Crowder maybe. Either way, he had nobody with the Jets.
Yeah.
He really didn't have anybody with the Panthers. He was
Correct.
decent for fantasy. If you ever looked at his games, he did put up a couple 30, 40 point games. Superflex, he's worth a shot. You might be able to get him for a second. And a starting QB for a second is in a good company, I think. He's got Jettas, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison's still there. TJ Hawkinson will come back probably mid to late season. That's your tight end, and then he's got Aaron Jones and Ty Chandler to hand the ball off to, or hit him on the slant. And it doesn't help that. I mean, it doesn't hurt him either that he's actually got Kevin O'Connell as a coach too. So, what are your thoughts on that?
It's a very interesting one because I think people, when you're talking about this deep sleeper, you'd probably look at multiple. You
Yeah,
look at either Darnold or McCarthy in that situation as a deep sleeper
same thing.
because you don't really know who's going to be the starter. But like you said, as of right now, Darnold, I mean, he probably should be getting the majority of the reps as of right
Yeah,
now. I don't think McCarthy was looked at as he's going to come in and start right away. Darnold's
I
been in
hope
the league a
not.
couple years and Darnold has had some good games. I'll, I'll,
Yeah,
I'll go on record and say that draft I think was the Mayfield draft. Josh Rosen, Darnold was my favorite quarterback coming out of that draft. I think Josh
yeah.
Allen was in that draft too, and obviously Allen's been the guy. But um,
I think
Dar-
Lamar was part of that draft too.
you might be right. So it's been those two who have been leaps and bounds better. But um, to your point, though, Darnold's probably in his best situation, especially with people to throw to. When you've got the best receiver in the league, I'm ready to crown Jefferson. He's the guy. Um, and Jordan Addison, man, I wanted to get him last year in our rookie draft. I wanted him so bad.
Yeah,
Uh, couldn't get him, unfortunately, but I mean, he's a stud. And then, like you said, they've got Aaron Jones too. This, if he gets the starting nod, the only problem for him is he is in such a tough division now. 2, 3 years ago, that wasn't necessarily the case. With Detroit, just kind of getting good, they were still really bad, and the Bears being how we are every year. But now you've got Detroit, who's the pride of the division, if you will, right now. Green Bay came on the second half of last season. Jordan Love looked really good, so they're going to be pretty solid. And now you kind of have Minnesota and the Bears in similar situations with rookie quarterbacks who both may or may not start week one. McCarthy might not. And Darnold in a situation where, if he starts, he's got weapons around him, but what are you going to get from him? Because you haven't seen him put up week to week, really good numbers. But we'll see. I like the pick from Darnold. As far as my deep sleeper, I had JJ on there. I also had my other two guys are Will Levis because
Mhm.
I was like, okay, we'll see what we get from him. He didn't start last year. He came on, had some games, they added pieces, but I don't know if anyone's that high on Levis yet either. So that's why I kind of had him more as a deep sleeper. Okay, maybe you. And then I also had your buddy, who's going to be kind of my buddy, Bo Nix. We'll see. We'll see how he does this year, right? He's supposed to
Yeah.
be, Denver. I don't think most people have. For me, deep sleeper is people with, the
Yep.
expectations not being that high. I don't think you
Yep.
can have the expectations that high on him yet. So we'll see how he does over there. I don't know um, his weapons over there with Denver. I don't think the Broncos' weapons are that good.
No,
But
not
he's
really.
got Sean Payton over there. He's supposed to be this big time head coach. So we'll see. He didn't want Russell over there. Now he's got Bo Nix. So we'll see
Yeah.
how he does.
Good pick. Good pick for a deep sleeper. I agree with you. Last but not least, busts. So when I'm talking about busts for fantasy, I'm not talking about a guy that's just going to completely flop. Even two guys on my list, I'll give some explanation behind them. But a bust can be just somebody who is drafted extremely high, and not even the NFL draft, but just overall drafted high in a fantasy draft and doesn't put up the QB1 numbers that you're drafting them at that draft capital. So when you look at busts, I look at that. So mine is a mixture of Daniel Jones and Derek Carr. Those guys I just don't think are good quarterbacks. But if I had to really pick a bust, I think it's Derek Carr.
Oh,
I think this is the last season that we're going to see him. I think his look after looking at how many times he got hit last year, he could barely throw the ball. I feel bad for like Chris Olave because he could be an amazing wide
he's a
receiver
stud.
too. So good. Problem is he's got Derek Carr, who was like a shell of himself last year, could barely throw. That being said, I also think if they brought in Spencer Rattler, if he looks anything like he did in college, he might even push for that job at some point this year. If he has a strong preseason, becomes the backup QB in New Orleans, no reason he can't be the starter come 2025. So Derek Carr is my bust. But if I had to pick like a QB out of the top 10, where people draft, I'm picking Trevor Lawrence. I have just seen a lot of underwhelming from him, but we've already touched on him a little bit. But passing it over to you.
Okay, so I'm glad you mentioned Daniel Jones because I had him on my list. I mean, I don't know why the Giants, I thought they were going quarterback in this draft. They decided to go with Malik Neighbors because you paid Jones. You can say what you want, but you know what? We've seen what Daniel Jones can do. He had one decent year. It was an above average year. It was a solid year. I'll give him that. What, 2, 3 years ago? But
For
you know,
fantasy, yeah, he won a couple of people championships. I swear across like 5 leagues that I was in, I felt like I saw more Daniel Jones in the championship than Patrick Mahomes, which is insane to me.
so I had him on the list. I've also got Caleb on the list because you know what? He's got a ton of hype around him, and there is a chance with the division we're in and him being a rookie quarterback, being thrust into the starting job week one. That's what the Bears do, and it doesn't usually work. So we'll see. Right? We'll see how that goes. Right? I mean, the book is still out on him. He hasn't played a game yet. He's a lot of hype around him. Supposed to be good. He was the number one guy. Okay. So now we got to see what you look like in real time. And I have another guy who has been in the league a few years, who played like 5 snaps last year, and who's on your favorite team, and Aaron Rodgers. I I'm a Bears fan, and I've always been an Aaron Rodgers fan. But what are you going to get from the guy this year? Coming off of a tough injury, he's like, what, 38, 39, 40 years old. You're going to have to somehow find a way to protect him, and you couldn't do it last year for all of 5 snaps, or even less than that. So my worry is how mobile is he really going to be? I already saw something come out like a few weeks ago, and someone was complaining about him not moving that well. I don't know what the story was on that. It might not have anything to do with it, but he's 40 years old, coming off of a tough injury. I don't know how good the Jets O line is. You can attest to that, but
I was going to say, I'll let you finish and then I'll jump in.
I don't even know as far as the weapons are over there. Okay, yeah, you've got your, Wilson, who's a fucking. We mentioned Olave as a stud. Wilson's a fucking stud. You're right. That's two more right there. We're up to seven, I think now. But um, the expectations were they were extremely high last year, and they're just as high this year for a guy coming off of a tough injury at a position where you got to protect him.
Yeah, I did think about putting him on my bust list as well, just because we're people. I don't think people are drafting him as high this year for fantasy as they were last year, given the hype. I so they did revamp the line. They replaced all but two starters, and those two starters were actually relevant. They brought in I think his name is Tyron Smith from Dallas, so
Okay,
got him. Moses
Moses
Moses.
Moses Malone.
I was going to say it, but I don't think it's Moses Malone.
Dr. J
um,
and Moses Malone.
they brought in Moses. He's on the other side at tackle. The biggest thing is their health too, and that was overall the thing with the line last year was they struggled to protect Rodgers and Wilson and whoever else was out there.
Yeah,
So that'll be a big issue. But they still have Brees Hall. He's actually coming back fully healthy this year. He doesn't have to ramp up. I mean, he made it game one last year after tearing his
yeah,
ACL late
crazy.
the 2022 season. So he's going to be an elite option for Dynasty. He's arguably could be the RB1 because just volume purposes for the Jets. But they did draft a guy, I think it's Malachi Corley, kind of a gadget wide receiver slash running back. Just think Samuel. He's coming out of a smaller school, so highly thought of. And then they did go out and trade for Mike Williams or sign Mike Williams this offseason as well. So some veteran guys. I mean, Tyler Conklin across the middle, having actually a good quarterback throwing it to him, but like you said, it's going to be on how well Rodgers moves. I think he's fine. He'll be there when he's needed. So if he's on the floor, we're good to go, or on the field, I should say.
Yeah, if
Um,
he's on the floor, you're probably not good to go. If he's on the field, that's good.
yeah, I hope he's not on the floor. But the only promising thing is that they went out and got Tyrod Taylor as a backup, and you've seen plenty, and you've probably seen him for fantasy purposes too.
Tyrod's
He
more than
puts up.
solid.
Yeah, so he'll get the job done. That defense is nasty. Last year they should have won more games if they would have. They were limiting teams to like 6 or 7 points. I mean, when we
They
do
should
the
have
projections,
they should have kept Mike White. Is what they should have done. They let him go to Miami to make a
two for
few
I
extra million
think it was like 2 or 3 years for like
for like
16
15.
mil.
Yeah, it
Uh,
was like nothing. I mean, they should have resigned him.
yeah, I mean, I don't think he was very good near the end of it anyway. When we did have him, and he wasn't clutch at all. There
Would
was
you rather
games that
had him last year or Zach Wilson?
I picked neither. No, probably Mike White would have been better. Actually, I'm going to take option C, Joe Flacco. We make the playoffs, probably make the Super Bowl with Joe Flacco. Let's be honest.
Joe Joe Flacco, huh? Oh
Hey,
man.
he led that Cleveland Browns team to the playoffs and a playoff win, I'm pretty sure.
That is true. And Cleveland had great defense just like you guys. So, I mean,
Yep.
that was really the thing for you guys. Once Rodgers went down, you just didn't have an even a decent option right there at
No.
quarterback. But yeah, you're right. With Tyrod, if anything happens, God forbid, you guys should be solid.
Yep. All right. Well, that's our sleepers breakout and bust. You'll hear more of it for other positions on the pod. Dan, obviously will be with us for those. Might get some Richie four bags in there for some of these as well. Give me a lot of offseason NFL talk too, just because All Star break coming up for baseball.